Now that the election's over, are you ready for your monthly dose of real estate facts? If so, stick around and find out what's going on next. Hey RRT family, Ryan Reynolds here with Keller Williams Consultants Realty with your November 2024 real estate market update. So what's going on here in November of 2024? Well, obviously we just had an election. Well, at least you had an election. For me, the election is tomorrow because I'm shooting this on Monday. So anything I say, please take with a little bit of a grain of salt because everything could change tomorrow. That said, we're going to focus on the three things we normally talk about. Inventory, how many homes are on the market. Mortgage interest rates, where are they going up, going down, what do we expect? And the third thing is going to be home sale prices. Is my house worth more this year than it was last year? And we're going to talk about maybe a few predictions on where that stuff might head in the coming months. So let's go ahead and jump into that now. The first thing we're going to talk about is inventory. Now, when we look at inventory now compared to where we were a year ago, we are up 25.4%. Now that's kind of crazy, but you got to think about a year ago in October, mortgage interest rates had just peaked and a lot of people were giving up and were taking their houses off the market. That said, even though all that was happening, we are actually at the highest level of inventory than we've had for a few years, and that's actually great. We have had a big problem with inventory over the past few years and just not having enough homes for sale. In fact, if we look at the measure of months of inventory, we're up to 1.6 months. And putting that into perspective, a 1.6 months of inventory is still a seller's market. It may not be quite as strong as it was before because a balanced market is somewhere between 4 and 6 months, but we're still in a strong, I'd say moderately strong seller's market. And so if you're thinking about selling your house, that's where you're going to be going into. The next thing we're going to talk about are mortgage interest rates. And when we think about mortgage interest rates, we typically focus on the 30-year fixed mortgage. Now, the story for interest rates is not actually so good. They bottomed this year on about September 16th or so at about 6.1%. And that happened after the Federal Reserve came out and said that they were going to be reducing the federal funds overnight lending rate by about 0.5%. Now, since then, what's happened is a pretty steady march up about 0.5% to right around 7.09, so almost 7.1%, which is a huge change because the amount of house you can afford at 7.1 is vastly different than the amount of house you can afford at 6.1. We want to see interest rates being low, but that may also be impacting the inventory situation. It's maybe some houses aren't selling that we would have expected to sell, and that's why that's up. So they're kind of interrelated. So now where do we expect mortgage interest rates to go? Well, in the long term, we're definitely expecting them to come down. They're likely to be below 6% probably by springtime, and then maybe even below 5.5% by this time next year. It all depends on how things go with the rest of the economy. Speaking of the rest of the economy, something that happened was kind of interesting is the jobs number came out about a week ago, and the economy in the third quarter only created 12,000 jobs. That's vastly below the 112,000 or 115,000 they were expecting, but it really didn't have that much of an impact because the unemployment rate stayed about the same. Now, how does that all work? Well, I think that the jobs creation rate is probably a leading indicator of what's happening with the unemployment rate. So I do expect to see the unemployment rate coming up. When that happens, that's when they'll start to really lower interest rates more aggressively. And I think we'll see more favorable borrowing conditions in the coming year. So that's about mortgage interest rates. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is what most people ask me about is how much is my house worth now compared to what it was worth a year ago? And most people are always astonished that it's still worth more. Even though in the national news, we're hearing a lot of things about how certain areas are depreciating in value and maybe the real estate market might implode. Not going to happen here. Everything is on the up here, and for a number of reasons. Honestly, I think number one is that our economy here is very diverse. We've got a ton of different types of industries. We've got financial services, we've got retail, we've got research and development, we've got government, and now we have Intel building a huge plant. So we have technology, and we have lots of other data centers being built. All that's driving our local market where we have an influx of people moving here, and as a result, home prices are up year over year right at 4.7% on the median. Now, I use the median instead of the average because it's a little bit more accurate indicator of what's going on, and I think it's a fun number to talk about. So anyway, up 4.7%. What does that really mean? Well, if you're a homeowner, it means that in the last year, if you have a $400,000 house, you made about $17,000, maybe a little bit more than that, just by owning the home. What it means if you're a buyer and you've been waiting a year because you're waiting for interest rates to come down is you just lost $17,000 because now you're gonna have to pay that much more for the same house as you would have last year. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in that if you don't own real estate, it's kind of like trying to catch a moving train. But if you do own real estate, you're kind of like trying to jump from train to train. And as a lot of you know, I'm a really good person when it comes to analogies, so hopefully you get the picture on that. Well, that's all I have for you here for November of 2024. If you have a question about your specific situation, feel free to reach out and we will customize the solution for you. As always, I'm Ryan Reynolds with Keller Williams Consultants Realty, unlimited opportunities and exceptional experiences.